So good morning, everyone, and sorry for the delay. There's mysterious things that happen in the software between the video camera. Good morning, everyone, and video camera and the software we have to talk to YouTube. And sometimes it seems to work, and sometimes all the things you can think of I try doing will eventually get it to work. So today it worked. And so I'm happy to be here again with you and happy to have this chance to sit. And, no sound. So there's two people who said that. But then nothing. So no sound. So does anybody hear the sound? All good there, have sound now. So I imagine that there's also challenges on your end, maybe. Yes, sound. Okay. Okay, thank you. So one of the wonderful things about mindfulness practice is I feel that in some of the comments I've seen here, that part of mindfulness practice is learning how to be at ease with things not, with the way things work. I was going to say when things don't work, but with how they work, with how things are unfolding. And so if there's these technological glitches, then hopefully we just fold it right into our practice and our time together and our community. And I kind of think it's special to see these remarks in the chat, and some of you are also having some communication between each other and supporting each other in this way. And so I appreciate this very much and enjoy these minutes we have together. So one of my favorite concepts in relationship to mindfulness is the word viharati. It's related to vihara, meaning a dwelling or a monastery. And viharati means to abide or to dwell. And the word abide, this concept of abiding and dwelling, is very different than, in my mind, the word to practice or to engage or to do anything, any active verbs. Viharati, to dwell someplace, is almost like a state of being than it is an activity. And so there is a point where mindfulness becomes a dwelling, something we abide in more than something that we are actively doing. So with that in mind, take a upright or appropriate posture for you for meditation, and gently close your eyes. And without doing anything else, as you turn your attention into the present moment, into your present moment experience, is there anything in this present moment for you that's simple and a refuge to dwell in? Is there anything here and now which can be a resting place for not only your awareness, but also for your very presence, your very sense of being? If you tune into your body and allow your body sensations to be as they are, even if it's just for a few moments, to Allow your body to be as it is, as if it has infinite permission to be this way. And if you do so, is there something, some goodness, some refuge available in the awareness of the body? Is there some capacity, some corner of awareness that is not trying to do anything, accomplish anything? Is there a way of knowing where the knowing is very, very simple, maybe even without words or without concepts, or maybe with? Is there some way of being aware? That it's enough just to be alive right now. It's enough just to be breathing and being present. Some part of awareness that is not for or against anything, doesn't lean into or pull away. Some part of awareness that maybe is silent or spacious. Has lots of space for all things. Like the space of a room has space, allows the objects of the room to be there without being disturbed. An awareness that's like space and doesn't react or is not disturbed by anything that is known. Perhaps a stillness in awareness that is a bit like clear, still water. It isn't that all of your experience is like this, but perhaps there's a place, there's a way, there's a corner or a center to awareness that has some qualities of just being, where we're not doing awareness, but we're resting in it, abiding in it. And with whatever sense or intuition you have of such an awareness, allow the experience of breathing to occur within this restful place, within this abiding of awareness. And the rhythm of breathing in and breathing out is like the waves coming and going across the beach, up and down. Or like a clear, still lake within which there are little fish that swim slowly around. The fish are seen, but they kind of float in the wider pool of clear water. whatever you're actually doing right now, thinking or trying to accomplish, behind that, underneath that, is a dwelling. It's a place to abide that needs nothing, wants nothing. A place of refuge. Sometimes can be referred to just a state of being, or a field of awareness. Or the natural knowing, cognition that arises in a peaceful mind. Is there some corner of your experience that corresponds to any of this? And can you abide there, rest there? And then as we come to the end of this sitting, are there other things you can abide in besides awareness? Is there something you'd like to stay close to today? Maybe abide in or stay connected to, that relates to your care, your love, your compassion for the world. And how is it that abiding in awareness, abiding in mindfulness, can support you to also be in touch with your care, your goodwill for others and the world? So that somehow coming out of your meditation practice is a strong inclination to help make the world a better place. Probably not by doing anything big, but in the small steps, the small encounters that you have during the day. So good morning, and this morning will be the last of the 5-part series on the faculty of mindfulness, and over these weeks I'm going through 1 week each on the 5 faculties, and so I've done 3 now: faith and effort and mindfulness. And those of you who've been following along might have picked up that these 5 talks each week are progressive, that they are talking about these faculties from the perspective of different points of the path of practice, or as the practice deepens or strengthens as it goes along here. And that for this mindfulness, the first day was what I called initiating mindfulness, the practice of just coming back, waking up, reconnecting to what's here. And that takes a certain kind of effort, certain kind of engagement, commitment to keep coming back, and or keep waking up, or keep recognizing that we're here. Then as the practice, as we begin more in the flow of the present moment, come back more often and hear more often, then that recognition factor can become stronger. And a very important part of mindfulness practice is to recognize clearly, oh, this is what's happening. To recognize a sound, a sensation, a thought for what it is. And part of the art is to learn to do that recognition without bringing along with it our preferences, our desires, our aversions, our complex associations and thoughts and interpretations of it, but just let the recognition be very plain and simple, very clear, a clear acknowledgement of what's happening. As we learn to do this, and as I get stronger, then it's possible to have more continuity with mindfulness, with awareness in the present moment. And then it's possible to observe, to kind of settle back and just observe over time how things are going, and to observe the breathing, to observe the sounds that come by, to observe the thinking as it passes by, like train cars going down the track that you watch, or boats going down the river you sit and watch. And you don't get on the boats, don't get on the train cars, but you just kind of watch it go by. So this kind of observing. As the observing gets stronger, observing as something has more continuity, then it's possible to see how things exist in the course of time, brief moments of time. And in particular, what I mean is to see how things are inconstant, the flow of life, the flow of change, the constant coming and going, arising and passing. That some or other, that mindfulness leads us to seeing change and inconstancy and permanence. One of the functions of that is abiding in, the language is abiding in observation. And as the practice develops and we see the impermanence of things, and that helps to loosen the grip of our attachments, preoccupations, resistance to things, then that quality of abiding becomes stronger. And perhaps even the sense of observation falls away, and there's just sense of awareness. Some people describe it as awareness as a field, and things just exist within the field. Things arise and pass, but there's a clear sense, a strong sense that there's this quality of awareness or clarity or space or beingness or a strong sense of restful presence that is here, and that things happen, but that sense of awareness doesn't change. In the Buddha's teachings on mindfulness, he calls this Sati, which is a very rare word in the suttas and his teachings, but I think of it as lucid awareness. And that's how the renowned translator Bhikkhu Bodhi sometimes now translates Sati itself as lucid awareness. But I think this lucid awareness, this very clear awareness that we really know we're aware, there's a kind of a reflexive quality of, yes, I'm resting, I'm here, there's awareness, there's clarity, where the clarity, the sense of awareness, the sense of knowing is so clear and so peaceful or so spacious that it is almost like its own thing, independent of what is known. And this idea of knowing that certainly knows something, but is independent of what is known, is getting close to the idea of how mindfulness brings freedom. And the Buddha, in talking about this Sati, this lucid awareness that's possible to abide in, he talked about that as synonymous with not being dependent on anything in the world, and not clinging or grasping to anything in the world. And so regardless of how we understand this abiding in awareness, lucid awareness, abiding in presence and beingness, whatever we want to associate with that, we know we're in its territory when we can feel that whatever arises in the moment, whatever we're aware of, the mind, consciousness, is in no way dependent on it or influenced by it or caught in it. It doesn't rest on it. It rests in awareness. It abides in awareness. And also there's no grasping to anything. And the awareness that's here, when there's no grasping, not being dependent on anything, and not being influenced by anything, just here, is a profound state of peace. It's a wonderful, peaceful state. So, in this way, I've talked about this, as mindfulness is a progression. And so there's mindfulness of, for beginning and intermediate and more developed mindfulness. And so it's easy to assume that there are those people who are just beginners, and they're at the beginning stage. Those people who have been practicing for some time, and they're more intermediate stage. And there's the people who practice a long time, perhaps, and they're at the kind of more advanced stages. I think it's, even for people who practice for a long time and are fairly mature in practice, I think that, it's probably a majority of the time they're beginners. Probably, depends, there's no fixed number here, but just for the sake of the discussion, for someone who's a mature practitioner, probably 60% of the time they're just being a beginner. They're doing initiating mindfulness, coming back and waking up, and then perhaps 30% of the time or 35% of the time they might be an intermediate practitioner, and maybe they're in that the Wednesday stage of just kind of being able to observe in some clear way and not interfere with things too much. And maybe that's only 5% of their time left, and maybe 4% of that time there may be in some really higher quality sense of abiding in awareness without much clinging or attachment, and 1% of the time they have some really, really high quality feeling of peace and expansionness, and whether these numbers are accurate or not is not the point. The point being that we're all beginners at times, and we're all, and we all start where we're. And the important point I'm trying to say is that the essence of practice is to be at the stage that you're at, to practice with how you are. And what I've seen in people who've, fairly mature practitioners is a sense of ease and willingness and acceptance to practice where they're at. And so if we're practicing as a beginner, that's fine. That's the practice of that moment. And in that regard, there's a wonderful saying for the purposes of mindfulness meditation. The fastest way to go from A to point B is to fully be at A. So wherever you're at, whatever your situation is, whatever the circumstances are, mindfulness is to be with that, practice with what you have, really do that. And if you find yourself over and over again as a beginner, that's your spot to practice. That's the place to find your ease. And keep showing up, keep waking up. If you're able to really start recognizing and find some freedom in the recognition, that's your place. If you're able to rest back and observe, that's your place. If you're able to kind of see the inconstancy of phenomena, that's your place. And if you're able to tap into the mind's capacity to abide in awareness, to have a kind of lucid awareness where there's no or very little clinging or attachment or dependency on anything, that's your place. And wherever your place is, it's your place. And then I'll end with, I think, a lovely kind of, for me, inspiring story or analogy, metaphor the Buddha gives about mindfulness practice. He talks about monkeys who seem to live kind of in the forests, the jungles of northern India, somewhere in the interface between the foothills of the Himalayas and the plains of the Ganges. And the Buddha said that if those monkeys go further up into the mountains where there's steep cliffs and crevasses, it's dangerous from up there. They can fall and hurt themselves and stuff. And if they come out of the forest down into the plains where there's no trees, not a lot of trees or forests, then they're very susceptible to being caught by hunters. But if they stay in their home country, in their native land, in that zone between the high mountains and the plains, in those jungles, I guess, then they're safe. So the same way, Buddha said, he talked about mindfulness, the practice of mindfulness, as being a person's native home, their home country. So I think the original language is ancestral lands, lands of your ancestors. And if you stay there, then you're safe. So this idea that this mindfulness faculty is your native land, is your birthplace, is the place where you most belong, your home, means it's a home you can bring with you anywhere you go. And if you stay close to it, there's safety there. If And if you don't stay in it, then there's dangers to encounter. So I hope that that's nice for you. And so next week we'll do this fourth faculty, which is concentration, Samadhi. And then the last one we'll do is wisdom. And but since it's Friday, and as we did the last two Fridays, I'll stay here for a little while. If those of you who would like to ask a question, I'll try to ask a question for the next 10, 15 minutes or so and be a little bit more responsive. I certainly have valued this chance to have a connection through you through the chat, and it's actually made it much more alive to sit here in an empty room and talking to a camera. I have a very vivid feeling of you all, or community out there, and I think that's very much helped by the chat. So if you want to ask questions, you're welcome to do so. And since that, as I'm happy to get very happy, I'll try to go through them. And if there's a lot coming at once, sometimes the questions go up and I can't necessarily go back and find them quickly. So here, how can you work on returning to, but not grasping, either the breath or the pleasant feelings of abiding? Oops. Let's see. I don't know. Oh, here we go. Maybe I can. Does this abiding include the breath focus, or can it release even that? Thank you. How can you work on returning to but not grasping either the breath or the pleasant feelings of abiding? So one of the very important principles in Buddhist practice is that the ideals that we present in Buddhism, so the ideal would be to not grasp at something, that we don't focus so much on doing the ideal and trying to make ourselves fit into the ideal. It's a little bit dangerous to kind of try to live up to an ideal directly and kind of hold ourselves in that position. But in mindfulness practice, we use the mindfulness practice to see what's actually going on. And if what's going on is we're grasping, then that becomes what we pay attention to. And so the way to come to non-grasping is to understand grasping well. And so it might be grasping the breath or pleasant feelings or even the idea of abiding. And that's suffering. That's beginning to cause some contraction or tightness or stress. And so those are very important part of mindfulness. So the recognition factor we talked about on Tuesday, to recognize we're recognizing what's happening. We're recognizing the grasping, the clinging, the resistance. And we're not trying to be dismissive of that and say, well, that shouldn't be there. But rather, we turn towards it to recognize and see it clearly. And then we learn something about it. We learn the stress of it. We learn the discomfort of grasping. We become wise at what we're grasping to and the trickery of grasping. And then over time, because we've become wise, then we begin to grasp less. And then as we grasp less, then what emerges is an ability to abide in awareness more. So we're not forcing ourselves into abiding. We're patient and taking our time and kind of growing into it as we start seeing clearly what's going on and how we operate. So let's see what else we have here. Can you say more about staying motivated through the beginning, intermediate, advanced status, especially in the beginning, intermediate stages? Great question. So there's two sides of practice. There's like the ideal. There is the path. It's onward leading to take us someplace to freedom from suffering, because we don't want to suffer. Buddhism has a lot to do with going from suffering to the absence of suffering. And so there is a path and change. To say there's no path is kind of discouraging, perhaps. But at the same time, mindfulness can help us take us on that path. At the same time, there's something about mindfulness, the moment of recognition, the moment of being aware of something, that has inherent in it qualities of peace, qualities of freedom, qualities of non-reactivity. And I would like people to first learn, as a beginner, from the very beginning, if they can, to begin looking for, experimenting with, how is it that a moment of mindfulness is a moment of freedom or is a moment of peace? It doesn't have to be dramatic, but how is it useful and valuable, so that you will never regret having been mindful. If you're a beginner for your whole rest of your life, you will say to yourself, that was a life well spent. All those moments that that each moment of mindfulness is in a certain way complete in itself, and that's the idea of to go from A to B, be fully at A. So I have put a lot of value that for a beginner, for anyone, to really kind of begin to explore and develop and talk to friends and to really find for yourself, what does it take? How is it that a moment of clear mindfulness is itself has something you'll never regret doing? It was valuable to really see and be present. And so if you do that exercise, then probably you'll be much more at ease about where you are on any kind of stage model of practice. Aversion to aging, illness, and death, and judgments about things happening in the world right now make it difficult to find a place of calm abiding. How can you find this abiding out in the world? That's a very good question. I think it's a question I think many people share with you right now. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of stress, a lot of fear, a lot of distress about what's happening in the world. And this is the time to practice more than any other time, I think. And so to I think, as I said to the earlier question, you want to study, you want to bring a lot of compassion to studying our distress, studying our difficulties and our challenges we have with what's happening right now, and not see it, and begin looking at how we're reacting to all this, what's going on, what are we doing, and maybe first it's important to allow yourself, in certain situations, to allow your heart to break. These are difficult times, and there's a lot of pain and suffering, and people are dying, people are up against very dangerous situations, people working in the hospitals and elsewhere, and there's a lot of distress in families, and people are home. Sometimes home is not a safe place for people to be, and they're cooped up with each other in ways that they don't usually have to be. So there's a way of sitting and practicing that we radically allow ourselves to be how we are. Let the heart break. Let us feel how difficult it is and the weight of all this. And then see and feel it in your body. Use all the skills of mindfulness you have. Do it in small dosages. Touch in. And sometimes I like to give the instructions that when things are really hard inside, a lot of difficult emotions, imagine mindfulness is a soft cotton ball that you gently touch up against the wound or this challenge that you have, and then you pull back. Because just to use mindfulness to go right into the difficulties and stay there can be just too much. But to have the wisdom, that it's valuable to see and recognize, acknowledge what's there, make space for it, even if it's 2 moments, and then pull back. And then when you're ready again, touch it again. Because we're looking for how can we transform, learn, allow this beautiful heart we have to find its way to resolve what's going on for us. So it takes a lot of honesty. It takes a lot of discomfort sometimes. Mindfulness practice can be talked in wonderful ideal ways of peace things. And I apologize if I give that impression too much. Sometimes what mindfulness is, and a really important part of mindfulness, is to learn how to be comfortable with discomfort, to learn about all our reactivity, our beliefs, our sense of self, all these things that come into play. And so I hope that you realize that all of you, that practicing mindfulness with discomfort is actually a really important part of mindfulness. It's not in the public advertisement, but don't go looking for discomfort. But if discomfort visits you in your practice, that's an important area of learning, to learn how to be more equanimous, non-reactive, to become wise about what goes on inside of us. And it comes a day that you can learn to be a certain kind of way comfortable with discomfort. And the world is an uncomfortable place. The world is inherently, in many ways, an unsafe place. And what is this current status of the coronavirus, it just highlights what's always been true, that this world is a fragile place, that dangers are here, ever present, and some people have them visit sickness, old age, and death come sooner than others, for others, but that is always here. And so what's happening now is just highlighting in a way that's distressing and difficult, but now is a time to practice. And if that begins with just caring for yourself, compassion for yourself, getting exercise, getting food, talking with friends, doing whatever is needed to come into some kind of balance. And once there's some balance, then maybe the practice can take you deeper into it. So I apologize that the way that this works, I find it a little hard to go through them chronologically the way they've come. Why does mindfulness seem to wax and wane over the days, or to be stronger after retreat and fade away, or be easier during peaceful times and harder during stress? I suspect it has a lot to do with our preoccupations. We get involved and active and thinking about things, and all these kinds of concerns that come along. And the more we're concerned about things, the more active we are, the more we're preoccupied, the more the emotions come along with that. the more the groove of thinking is operating, and we get caught in our thoughts, involved in our thoughts. There could be mood shifts that go on, and emotions come and go, and we can have a good night's sleep and a not a good night's sleep. We could, be physiologically something could be going on that makes life difficult for us, or we're not quite our best self or something. There's so many variables that goes on in human life, and certainly, with coming from a retreat. On retreat, there's a calmness, a steadiness, a concentration factor that's gotten strong. We've really cleared the table to some degree of a lot of the preoccupation. And so all those things begin to wane. The preoccupations come back, the concentration wanes, and it's hard to keep the same level of concentration in daily life as we have on retreat. But again, this really be at A. Don't be so concerned about the ideal. The idea is to learn how to practice with what is. And if what is complicated, is preoccupied, we're agitated, there is this wonderful art of this discovery. I think it's a real treasure of mindfulness, is to, in a certain kind of way, accept that, or maybe better say, don't be in conflict with any way that you are. But see if you can start discovering how there can be a moment of mindfulness, a moment of recognition. Oh, this is how it is. And in that simpler, oh, this is how it is. It doesn't fix it. It doesn't make them go away. Things are still uncomfortable. But there is a gap. There is a little crack in our experience where there is some degree of peace, of freedom, of ease, of acceptance, of non-conflict. in which there's space maybe for more compassion, more wisdom to operate, and we can find our way. So I hope that and then the question here I see is how not to be afraid. To answer the question as short as it's been asked and to the point of what it's asked, how not to be afraid is don't cling to anything whatsoever. That fear is definitely a byproduct, most fear definitely a byproduct that we're clinging to something, attached to something. So the question is short, my answer is short. I feel like that short answer doesn't really respect the complexity of fear and what goes on and the care that's needed to be with fear. One of the wonderful little instructions that I will give around fear is when you're afraid, help your fear feel safe. If you're distressed about your fear is not going to feel safe to be there. And it's going to be more afraid, or you're going to get the whole system's going to be more upset. If you feel like it's wrong to be afraid, or you're afraid of fear, it all makes it more complicated. Your fear is a very important part of who you are. It's, in a sense, fear is trying to take care of ourselves. It's a movement of self-care, of self-protection. Sometimes the fear is misplaced. Sometimes it involves acts of imagination, that predictions and fears of the future that are not really realistic or even appropriate. But regardless of that, fear is still a wonderful movement of self-care and self-protection. And to take that movement of self-care and self-protection and hold it with cupped hands of awareness and help it feel safe. It's okay. The great mantra for fear is, it's okay. It's okay. And to do that, especially in meditation, and then see what happens to the fear. Fear will begin to thaw. Fear will begin to relax if it starts feeling that you're a safe person for it. It's kind of like a small child, maybe who's really afraid. And maybe that you're not going to psychoanalyze the child. The child will just get more afraid or turn off. You're not going to try to tell the child to be different. You maybe bring the child over and put a hand on the shoulder and you say, it's okay, and you help the child feel safe and maybe give the child some treat or something to eat or drink. But help your fear feel safe. So thank you very much. I appreciate the questions, and they're all very important, and I wish I could have answered even better and more respectful and really meet you. I would love to be able to meet and support each one of you as you are and offer the kind of care and acceptance of each of you that I think the mindfulness you can bring to yourself through the mindfulness practice. So thank you so much, and I hope to see you on Monday.